Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and kick it off. We got it into it pretty quick here. So real quick, I am the MC today. So my name is Aaron Brinkman. I work at InterVision as a solution architect, specifically focused around security. Previously have worked at some OEM vendors and some security vendors in the field, but I have about 20 years experience in cybersecurity. And I've been on both sides of the house, whether it was sales or on the customer side. And I've been through events on both sides, right? So chasing down false positives, as well as helping customers through some of these stressful events. And so that's something that Nathan and Al are going to dive into a little bit here today, and we'll do some introductions with them today. But before we kind of get going, I just want to preface that what we're going to talk about today is the incident response, the state of the union with these incidents themselves, how stressful they can be, and kind of that importance of being prepared and having an IR plan and a team dedicated behind it, as well as the importance of the solution itself. And so this IR retainer and the capabilities that Arctic Wolf provides, we partner with them specifically to make sure that we provide a complete package. And some of the solution itself, the naming convention that we use at InterVision is RPAS, but it is a full solution suite to be able to protect you in events like this. So before we dive a little bit too deep into it, I'll hand over to Nathan and Al to do some introductions.
Sure. Hi, Al Doshin, director here, Channel Alliances. Been with Arctic Wolf about 3 years. I handle the incident response jumpstart here at Arctic Wolf. And my colleague, go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Little, and I lead the incident response services team here at Arctic Wolf. So we respond to about 1,000 major cyber breaches every year, from ransomware to major fraud, nation state attacks, international cyber espionage, kind of you name it. So, and then Aaron, do you want to dive into the threat landscape now? Do you want me to pull it up now? I can't remember exactly what the schedule was. Should we run with it?
Yeah, let's dive into the threat landscape first, and then we'll kind of see state of the union. And then from there, we'll dive into Al's focus points on how we're combating that with the IR retainer and cybersecurity.
Sounds great. Okay, 1 second, I'll pull it up. Okay, so obviously everybody's already met both of us in those brief introductions, but when kind of Al and Aaron came to me about this presentation, I wanted to put together kind of what I called the real threat landscape data. So this is like very great data, real world scenarios about what's happening in the cyber attack world. And it's been fairly consistent in terms of methods, types of attacks for the last 6 years or so. And what we've seen in the last 6 years is ransomware is probably the biggest threat to organizations great and small. Many of you probably saw in the news the MGM cyber attack. Obviously major casino in Vegas totally shut down, room access not even working. But interestingly, like that was the Black Cat ransomware group, I believe. They're number 3rd on this chart in terms of overall frequency. This is volume of attacks in the 3rd quarter of last year, and 4th quarter was very similar. But we've responded to Black Cat attacks for 3-person law firms and 50,000 people organizations. And the attack methods are very similar. I think that's what's so interesting about the cyber world. The threat landscape doesn't discriminate. Every organization is a potential victim. And I'll go through a few examples. But just this morning, I was polishing up this deck, and I found it very interesting because you'll see Lockbit, the most prolific ransomware group of the past 2 years or so, including very high-profile victims. Like this is a public incident. This is not sensitive client data or anything. They attacked Boeing, the airline manufacturer. Huge client, tremendous damage. But Lockbit attacks all sorts of organizations. But Probably too prolific, so prolific that they caught the attention of law enforcement in a major way. Many of you probably saw it. It was pretty newsworthy, depending on which LinkedIn circles you run in. The Lockbit group was quote unquote shut down by the FBI. So here's a screenshot of their breach site. Now, for those of you that don't know, these ransomware groups, when they steal data from organizations, they threaten to publish it on the dark web, but really it's just their websites that they use to name and shame victims. Sometimes you'll hear these called the shame websites, where not only did they encrypt your data, but they had stolen your data. And if you don't pay a ransom, they'll publish your data and try to release sensitive information to the world. Well, this is their current leak site. Joint law enforcement effort with the FBI, Europol, and a bunch of other organizations. I know you probably can't really see this in a ton of detail, but they changed all of the victim postings, which used to be these little red and green boxes, to things that will help victims of Lockbit, like free decryption, because the law enforcement stole the decryption tools. So huge win. I thought when I went through kind of which threat groups have been most active, I thought it was certainly worth mentioning this change in the environment. Now, also important to note, and I'll try to explain it quickly, Lockbit is what's known as a ransomware as a service group. So Lockbit is an attack platform and technology that cybercrime groups all over the world, from individual people to more organized groups, can join the Lockbit platform and conduct attacks and use the Lockbit platform to conduct those attacks. So this is not law enforcement bringing hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of cyber criminals to justice. This is just law enforcement shutting down one provider of ransomware technology. Still a huge win, but unfortunately, it doesn't really decrease the cybersecurity risks out there to the world. And kind of why I threw this chart in there is the attack groups, they will change in volume. 2 years ago, it was a much different threat group than Lockbit, which was the most prevalent now. Humans in the world, whether they're in Canada, where a few people in the recent last few years got actually found and arrested, Russia, other Eastern European countries, even some in the United States, the attack landscape doesn't change that much. And if one group gets shut down, the attackers, the actual human attackers behind it, they'll just use a platform. But it may slow down the number of attacks that are occurring. But like I mentioned earlier, these attacks, and we're focusing on any type of attack here, but it's primarily ransomware and even just simple business email compromise leading to wire fraud is the most common method in there with the BECs, where that's somebody accesses an email box for an organization and they create some clever forwarding rules and conduct some wire fraud by intercepting invoice payments and changing banking details. A super simple type of attack, but still leads to billions of dollars of losses each year. But the reason why I wanted to show this chart is, although this changes month to month and even quarter to quarter, many organizations are victims of cyber attacks, and long gone are the days where cyber attacks were mostly focused on healthcare and banking, although those are still two of the top victim organizations because of the sensitivity. We've seen every type of organization get hit by major cybercrime. And when we are engaged by a client, the Arctic Wolf incident response team, we help with any component of responding to the incident, from investigating the root cause of the incident. And that's the next set of data I'll talk about, which is, I think, the most important part of defending against incidents, is knowing what the first piece, the root cause, how the attacker originally got into the network is. But we'll also help negotiate with cyber criminals, which is a fascinating part of the response, and just incredibly impactful when done well, to helping with restoration and working with our partners to help with restoration. So we kind of see the incidents from all lenses, including incidents that impact every industry. So then this is one of my favorite pieces of information. And when I said at the start, like, I kind of titled this presentation, The Real Threat Landscape. I think it's important in a world where there's a ton of really helpful information, but it's from all sorts of different lenses. Like depending on who produces the threat landscape data, you might get a much different picture that's going to not as accurately educate your cybersecurity and your response decisions. But this is just the true breakdown of every incident that we've investigated, what had caused it. And I'll go into more depth in the next two slides. But many of you have probably heard that most cyber attacks come through users doing accidental things, opening emails, downloading things, visiting unsafe websites. It's certainly true that many attacks do come through that, but that's just the orange section in these charts. The accidental user actions, or sometimes intentional user actions for a small segment of it, is typically averages around 30% of incidents we investigate. And this is important because it helps educate cybersecurity decisions. I think in the past, like if you go to 10 years ago, this was probably a little bit higher chunk, and that's before endpoint protection tools were really powerful and people were doing a really good job at the endpoint, preventing an incident. Now, many organizations have great MDR services like Arctic Wolf and others that are monitoring every single endpoint, and this has gotten a lot better. Even just running endpoint protection improves the user piece of this. So as everybody has gotten better at protecting the endpoints, attackers, for many reasons, and I'll go through some of them, have switched to other methods of attack. And they love focusing on external exposure. So what I mean by external exposure, I mean external network exposure. So that's vulnerable web servers, VPNs, that's the most common one. It's vulnerable VPNs or VPNs without multi-factor authentication, things where the attacker can go from the perimeter of the network, scan your organization, and immediately gain access because of certain vulnerabilities or issues. Of course, that's their favorite way to attack. It's the easiest. It works every time. It's rinse and repeat. So not surprising at all. And here's a little bit more of the breakdown. Now, this chart, depending on what vulnerabilities exist and really what's going on in the world, the breakdown here can change a little bit. But currently, attackers' favorite method to access networks for data theft, for ransomware, for anything that they would do inside of the network, but mostly ransomware, and then sometimes only secret data theft where they don't ask for any ransom payment, is through external remote access. 26% of that is through VPNs. Now, this could be VPNs where they don't have MFA, passwords are leaked. Attackers love to put their Linux attack box on the VPN because they're immediately on the network with every tool that they can imagine. So it's trivial to conduct an attack after that. But the section that the attackers love the most, and there's a little bit of crossover between these two sections, and my real world case example that I'll work quickly to get to is related to that, is the software exploits or external vulnerabilities. So these are the Citrix bleed, the FortiGate vulnerability that leaked a bunch of VPN passwords, Exchange Hafnium, if you remember a few years back when pretty much every Exchange server in the world got hit with a web shell that allowed attackers to steal information. Those are attackers' absolute favorite method of attack because it's easy and it's repeatable and they know it's going to work and they know it's going to most of the time lead to making some sort of money from the organization. So then here are two of the most active ones we're seeing right now. One is from the fall. That's the Citrix bleed vulnerability. I have a real world example of that in a little bit. But what makes cybersecurity so tough is every month, every week, every day, it seems these days, there's a brand new vulnerability. FortiGate being one of the most recent. FortiGate, nothing particularly wrong with them, but they've had two pretty nasty vulnerabilities in recent memory that have led to cyber attacks. But so has Citrix, so has SonicWall. Everyone that has perimeter network devices, especially VPNs, have had these types of incidents, and they can be incredibly damaging. So that's why security obviously isn't a point in time, one time a year thing. It's continuous monitoring, it's continuous patching. But that's one of the reasons why it's so important. And it's a really race against the attackers. If these attackers find the vulnerabilities and exploit them before patches are available, then everybody's in big trouble. That's kind of what happened with the Move It vulnerability. That was a vulnerability in an FTP transfer program that allowed attackers to just immediately steal data from the Move It FTP software for very large organizations. And all they had to do was script it across the entire world, and they stole data from nearly every single organization. Not to say user actions don't lead to incidents. It's a fairly even breakdown overall, but you'll see a lot of people think, oh, phishing emails, like most of this comes through email. Only 100 out of the nearly 1,000 incidents that we investigated, this is kind of on a rolling year, or this might actually be 3 quarters. Yeah, it is 3 quarters, were from phishing emails. Everything else was the broader threat landscape, these other categories: accidental downloads, compromised web browsing, social engineering phone calls. Kind of runs the gamut when you're trying to get users to let you into the network. And Aaron and Al, if there's anything you want me to focus more on as we go through, feel free to jump in. I'm trying to move quickly because there's a lot to cover in a short window, but hopefully it's helpful.
No, the only other thing I was going to kind of add to is, and you're kind of showing it here, is just the fact that because of AI and AI tools that are starting to be exposed to the public and the adversaries themselves, they're starting to use these tools specifically to target anyone and everyone. So it used to be, let's go after the big money targets. That's where the real money is. But now, if they can get a little bit less money out of a technology or a company, they are focusing towards those other verticals in the market, specifically because it's cheaper for them to actually kick off these campaigns. So, Nathan, I'm sure you're going to dive into it a little bit more, but it's always a good conversation to have that. Once again, having full visibility, having that 24/7 monitoring that Arctic Wolf provides, and then having the capability to have Nathan's team behind it to be able to provide this expertise is huge and critical.
Yep. Yeah, like you mentioned the impact that AI has. AI has the same impact and benefit to cyber criminals as it does to everybody else. It makes humans conducting whatever effort they're going after more efficient, more easily able to create software and malicious emails. And so that's what it's doing for the attackers. Like an attack that used to take a few weeks to plan now can be done in 1 minute, because you can write to malicious AI and say, hey, I'm targeting people in the construction industry that are currently purchasing construction materials. Write an email that would get them to click this link to view an invoice. And it's written in perfect English or whatever country they're targeting. And it takes zero work for them. And it's probably more believable than they could ever write on their own. So it definitely, although AI, helps organizations like us included, better filter through massive amounts of data, it certainly benefits the attackers as well. So it's just improving the speed of both the good and the bad people. This slide, I think it's important to focus on the idea of ransom payments, because many organizations that fall victim to ransomware attacks, regardless of if they have backups or not, are still paying ransoms to attackers. It's changed a little bit over the years, but the threat of needing to pay a ransom to a cyber criminal is still very real. This middle paragraph here, in situations where an organization does not have backups of 100% of their data to recover operations, 58% of those organizations need to pay a ransom. And the data is a little bit nuanced. I think you could certainly argue that it's higher than that. I would say if an organization cannot continue business without paying a ransom because the attacker impacted backups, they usually do, I would say 100% of those organizations pay a ransom because they don't have a choice. Now, interestingly, 42% of organizations, even if they don't need the decryption program, 42% of organizations are still choosing to pay a ransom to avoid or at least reduce the risk of their stolen data seeing the public or ending up in the public ecosystem. Still a pretty big threat. And these ransoms range from, we've seen as high, as low as 100,000 is about the floor these days. There's still some kind of offshoot threat groups that will have lower. But we've seen as high as $50 million for ransom demands from organizations. So it can get, imagine your organization being ground to a halt, not able to conduct business, backups being impacted, and an attacker demanding $50 million. Now, for some organizations, like some of the casinos that were in the news, that's not that much money. For other organizations, maybe they have cyber insurance to help a little bit, maybe they don't. That can be a very daunting amount of money or an impossible amount of money in some situations. So it still is a disastrous threat. So in the last few minutes here, and we probably won't have time for a ton of questions, but I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions, through Aaron or through whatever mechanism, because I did try to pack a lot in here. But I touched on this a little bit, like, okay, everybody talks about vulnerabilities being such a huge threat, but I wanted to go very quickly through a real world example. So Citrix bleed, we saw many incidents caused by Citrix bleed. And so the Citrix bleed vulnerability, just so everybody knows, was a vulnerability that with a trivial, simple web request to a Citrix server that's open to mostly the world and maybe limited to just one region, the attacker could immediately access all of the current session tokens for all Citrix sessions. So it doesn't matter if you have MFA, any protections, the attacker can just immediately access all of the sessions that are active. And unless you're stopping a session from being used from a different IP address than the one it was created with, which most people don't do because it creates a lot of inconvenience as you're bouncing between networks, the attackers can walk right in. And what did they do when they walked right in and moved laterally to some critical servers? They left a ransom note like this behind. This is what a ransom note looks like for this type of attack. This is a lockbit ransom note that's edited to remove some sensitive information, but this is the text file that appears all over the network. It says, hey, talk to this Tor link and chat with us to figure out how much we're asking you to pay. And here's an example of what that web request looks like to exploit the vulnerability. It is as simple as sending that highlighted part in this picture to the Citrix server, and then you get the full session tokens with a couple of other steps, but there's publicly released code to do it. And then they walk right in and they see this nice type of page for your organization where they can access email, desktops, anything. Many of you are probably familiar with Citrix. And then they simply install another remote access tool that would probably go undetected by endpoint protection tools. In these cases, most of the attackers were choosing to use Screen Connect for this type of attack. And that's just so that once you rotate the Citrix sessions, they can still use Screen Connect to get back in. Aaron, I know I'm running out of time, but I'll just cover a couple more things. And then Al can dive into anything else we have time for. One really fun thing that once in a while the incident response team gets to do. So we responded to this case. It was obviously not a current MDR customer. This was a customer that actually was referred to us through our incident response jumpstart retainer, which is something we can talk more about. But they didn't have our MDR service. We were actually able to recover the attacker's credentials where they had stolen the client's data and stored it. And we were able, through special legal channels to get permission, we were able to actually go into the attacker's server and delete this data for the client. So they didn't have to pay a ransom. We were able to steal the data back from the attacker that was still obviously fully owned by our client and gave us permission to delete it. And we were able to protect our customer a little bit. So certainly a not ideal situation for the customer. They still had some business interruption time, but they didn't have to pay a ransom, and our team was able to secure the network, get the attacker out of the network, and then actually delete the stolen data from the attacker's servers. So I will skip towards the end. And then, obviously, these are very similar to a lot of things you would see, but defense in depth is so important. These vulnerabilities and all of these attack methods are still going to happen. So monitoring everything, monitoring for lateral movement, preventing attackers from gaining access to other systems when they do compromise that VPN, so important. Ransomware volume, don't pay attention to the news. It's going to ebb and flow. People are going to say, wow, it was a really slow year. It was a really busy year. Ransomware attacks, whether they're the flavor of the day or not, when attackers gain access to your network, they're going to do something to monetize it. Now, the really scary thing is ransomware is very noticeable because they leave a ransom note. There's plenty of ways that attackers monetize access to your network that might go entirely undetected. And that, I think, is where cybersecurity gets even more interesting. And then obviously monitoring every aspect of the environment to avoid this type of incident. But thanks for letting me display some of this, talk through some of this. Happy to answer any questions in the future, although I know we might not have time now.
No worries. It looks like we do have one question. Any industry specific regulations or best practices for dealing with ransomware, kind of to help minimize risk? A lot of times you're going to go into a lot of those regulatory or compliance recommendations or frameworks. You're going to look at NIST and start to go down best practices of what NIST has, or CMMC, and you're going to start to help provide that guidance and start to close some of those gaps, as well as leverage some of your partnerships like InterVision, being able to do some managed services or pro services when you don't have the staffing for it. So a lot of times you'll start to see a lot more shift towards that to be able to help identify and close those gaps along the way. Anything you guys want to provide on that?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And then the partners, companies like us, others in the industry, usually the most efficient way to get these security solutions, but you have to start with the table stakes. Like you have to have MFA on everything. But as we saw, fairly easily bypassed more and more these days. So then you have to be doing constant vulnerability scanning. Well, what if the attackers know about the vulnerability before it can be patched? Well, then you need to be monitoring the VPN for malicious use with technologies like Arctic Wolf MDR. Well, what if they get past that? Well, you need to be monitoring every server for credential dumps and other things. So I wish there was one silver bullet, but if there was like a quick list of kind of like, okay, if you're not doing these things, you will certainly get hit. I would say full MDR, monitoring every endpoint, VPN, all of those things, doing internal risk scanning for internal and external vulnerabilities, having a backup disaster and recovery plan that can't be impacted by the attackers when they're in the network. That's obviously critically important. MFA critically important. And then when all else fails, having an incident response plan, incident response firm on retainer so that you know how you're going to respond and you can recover in a day, but best case scenario, unfortunately, sometimes a few hours. We've had a few clients rather than weeks and weeks because there wasn't a plan, there wasn't correct backup systems, but that could be a 6-hour presentation in and of itself.
No, that's perfect. And yeah, perfect segue into Al's conversation. Absolutely on how we can take those approaches, help close some of those gaps. And then if you do have to just kind of shift the where the risk is at, that's what Al's going to kind of talk about a little bit more with the security and IR plan.
Yeah, and a lot of what Nathan shared was really what comes back to every organization understanding what happens and then really where things are at with if something happens. Now, I kind of look at it as what is your readiness plan and do you have one? A lot of the organizations we work with or that we speak with and team up with InterVision on is a lot of organizations may have a readiness plan, but really overall, what does that mean and how often does it get reviewed? How often do you do adding or deleting of data that may or may not, be needed? Who do you call if something were to happen? Really, one of the big things that I always look at is, are you putting a plan in place so that you know who to call first, or who are your first 5 to 7 calls? Then what data is needed so that you can mitigate or remediate a plan as quick as possible to get that data to whoever is going to help you. Obviously Arctic Wolf, coupled with InterVision, can help you with the incident response side. It really, the way I look at it is, if you put this plan in place, if you do the exercises such as tabletop simulations, do other testing within the framework around a readiness plan, that will help you with a foundation for your security posture that will fit inside your security strategy. And one of the big things that I always look at is, from the readiness plan, a lot of organizations have a couple of people designated. What we've really come up with over the last couple of years, since we purchased Tetra, the Arctic Wolf side, and now they've evolved our group in terms of the incident response, opened our eyes to really how it should be done the right way. We're able to help organizations really with their readiness plan. And then that helps to kind of move on to, once they are ready for an incident, how do you become proactive? And that means, adding to your MFA, EDR, backup, good hygiene with, this managed detection response, or, manage risk, or education of the organization. A lot of organizations that I've found is they educate the organization to a point, but they don't always talk about phishing or smishing or physical or social. And those are some of the areas, as Nathan kind of alluded to, that get hit a lot, or ways that are entry points into the organization. So what we do is we really, try to make sure that you as an organization understand what that, in totality, your readiness plan is, your proactive side, and then we've got other areas that we help you on, how do you pay for all these things? Because that's, at the end of it, you still have, to pay for an incident. But when you have a team around you and kind of this holistic approach, you mitigate the risk a lot less. So I'm going to, kind of look at it from the perspective of, is your plan up to date? Who's got access to it? And then, do you know where to start? And those are some of the things that we always like to make sure you as an organization are ready for. So that's really my biggest things that I wanted to talk. I can always dive deeper into what we do. I see there's a question.
Looks like, what would gap analysis with InterVision look like? We're a state agency that went through a rather destructive breach, that once remediated the contract agency through VA Corp, our cyber insurance company. We made a substantial investment in Barracuda through InterVision and have really improved our posture, but we are aware we can always do more. So they're taking the right approach. They're layering in the security appropriately. So just kind of looking at what that gap analysis would be. And a lot of times we're partnering with Arctic Wolf specifically to look at and help provide information in regards to what that gap analysis would be from an insurance perspective. They have a lot of contacts in the insurance space, especially with their IR plan. They're on a lot of boards specifically for it, as well as our cybersecurity advisors can help provide some of that gap analysis itself to make sure that we close any of those gaps to help strengthen your security posture along with that. So once again, help close all the gaps and then work with a team like OWL and make sure that we get the best value out of your cybersecurity policy.
Yep. A lot of, when you look at your security posture, what your goal is really to mitigate risk. And so working with InterVision, Arctic Wolf, and being able to put in place these the readiness plan, the proactive side. Really, the industry is moving to being able to show that an organization is in a better security posture. So therefore, from a cyber insurance standpoint, brokers and cyber insurance carriers should be looking at, giving a reward or a discount in terms of being able to look at the cyber insurance based on the investment you as an organization put in. One of the things that I've always said is, if you're looking at an incident response plan, a 1 hour SLA helps. It's very difficult for most organizations to do. That's why, the Arctic Wolf platform does what we do from our incident response. Make sure that when you're looking at it, you've got the expertise from that incident response firm to be able to help, that they've helped build run books for you. And, one of the things that I love, and Nathan laughs at me all the time, but I love the fact that our readiness plan, our incident response jumpstart, is that single source of truth. It's a portal for you to be able to put everything in and have multiple people have access. So that's really my only sales pitch, if you would. But the biggest thing I would say is, as an organization, make sure that you have a readiness plan. You understand your proactive side. And then, it's really good to be able to help to, how do you pay for it when something does happen? So that's all I have for you today. So thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thanks, Al. Appreciate it. I'd like to next introduce Cassidy. She is our sneakerhead. She will help dive a little bit deeper into the sneakers themselves and kind of the offering here.
All right. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with you all this afternoon. My name is Cassidy Edwards. I am reporting live from sunny Florida by way of Houston, Texas, which is my hometown. And I work with LMH Experiences. I'm kind of their resident sneakerhead, but you can think of me today as your culture engineer, your culture architect. So as you're thinking about customized solutions through Arctic Wolf and partners, I am going to take you through customizing a sneaker, right? So we're going to think about that. And before I get into who I am and what I do, I would love to get to know my audience a little bit. It's the afternoon mindfulness break. You can relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw, kick your feet up, have your favorite beverage on deck with me as we get into all things sneaker culture. So on a scale from 1 to 10, and you can just put your number in the chat, I would love to see your level of sneakerhead. So where do you think you rank on that 1 through 10? A 1 is someone who doesn't really care too much about sneakers, but we have feet, so we have to wear shoes. And then all the way to a 10 is someone who knows their brands, knows their silhouettes, probably has a nice rotation of sneakers, maybe a collector, you would say. I love that we have some 1, 2s, and 3s. Joanna may have to come up here and co-host with me. She's a 10. So I love that. And I think the 1s, 2s, and 3s kind of grab something from this conversation from sure. So D March said, where do you rank Crocs with socks? I do it all the time. Yesterday, I had some tie-dye Crocs on that didn't match anything. So I'm definitely a Crocs fan. I was late to the game, but I am here. And so this is a safe space. Everyone is a sneakerhead here. It's a judgment-free zone. And if I'm being transparent because of that today, I am wearing some off-brand just slides, just house shoes. It doesn't match anything either, but I am going to show you some pretty classic and exclusive sneakers as we walk through this customization sneakers design. So definitely a huge Crocs and socks fan. I'm a very big slides and socks fan as well. And so I get 3 questions usually when I come to these custom kicks, and I've done over 120 of these conversations. I love talking about sneakers, right? So who is this lady? How many sneakers does she have? And why are sneakers even important? Like, why are they even a thing? So I am the director of people operations at a tech startup called Trade Block. And what we do is we create a digital experience around sneaker trading. So in the sneaker world, you have your buy-sell marketplace, and then you have your aftermarket. So your aftermarket is like StockX, right? Resale market is what we call it. Then you also have GOAT, which is another competitor to StockX. And right in the middle, you have eBay, which is pretty much a marketplace for everything. So we create that old school barter system, that digital experience around sneaker trading, upload your closet, see people's closets and wish list, and we just take it back to that old good feel, right, of trading sneakers. I also create content through sneaker storytelling with some brands that you might know: Nike, Jordan, Adidas, New Balance, some retailers like Foot Locker, JD Sports. So we do a lot of sneaker storytelling with these brands directly in marketing campaigns. And last but not least, I run a very unfiltered HR newsletter called Yo, You're on Mute, which is a play on words. And we just try to enable, high performing teams through the lens of an HR lady. So you can kind of think of me today as well as your HR lady in sneakers. So how many sneakers do I have? I am going to see if I can upload a little picture that gives you an into just kind of what it looks like in my sneaker, let's say, my sneaker organization. I don't know if it's going to let me upload the picture, but it is definitely quality over quantity at this point in my life. I joined the 40/40 Club last year, so you can kind of connect the dots there. But I've been collecting sneakers and loving them for over 2 decades, been in HR for about 15 years, just to sum it up. And so I have about 150-ish pairs of sneakers. They're all over the house. They are very organized in these drop front boxes right here. If you like them, you can get them from Container Store. Online as well. And so there's no more playing sneaker Jenga, sneaker Tetris, because that can get a little troublesome, right? And so why sneakers? Why are they even a thing? And so for me, sneakers have been a universal language of creative expression. And so your style is an extension of that creative expression, right? And so they've created community. Sneaker culture is about connection, hence why I get to be with all you cool people today. It's creating community and it's comfortable. Sneakers are comfortable, if I'm just being honest. And so we're going to dive into some of my goals for you are really just to unlock some of your creative expression, to design your own custom pair, and also take you on a trip down memory lane. I live in a time capsule in the 90s, and the 90s for me was really the golden era for everything. So you think of buzzwords in tech, we deal a lot with AI. It's not new to the game, but it is a big buzzword. AI for me growing up in the 90s was literally just my friend behind me. Allen Iverson, the crossover king, my first crush, all of those things. And so that has molded my love for sneaker culture. So we're going to look at some sneakers. I'm going to take you on a mini masterclass of some really cool sneakers. We're going to go through my journey first. I'm going to take you over to some of the classics, one of the biggest sneaker trends that I'm seeing today, and then we'll round it out with some best tips and tricks. I may be able to show you as well one of my favorite sneakers, which is very hard for a sneakerhead. We love our kicks and we wear our sneakers. So asking a sneakerhead their favorite pair is equivalent or almost equivalent to asking a parent their favorite child. And we don't have an answer for that, or we shouldn't. And I have 3 kids. So let's get into some of the sneakers. I'm a visual learner, so we're going to start with parts of the shoe and also kind of the personality of the shoe, right? And so one of my favorites from the 90s, I'm going to take you back to skate culture. So when you think skateboarding in the 90s, what were we wearing? We were wearing thrifted clothes. I was wearing Jinko jeans. I don't know if y'all remember those, but the legs were like this big. And I was wearing Converse, Vans, Nike Dunks. I was wearing Airwalks, a lot of Alien Workshop gear. I was skateboarder adjacent. I would say I tried the thing, couldn't do the thing very well. But the soundtrack to my life at the time was also all the alternatives. So Nirvana, Green Day, Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam, Red Hot Chili Peppers, all of the greats. And as my music taste started to evolve into more rap, R&B, and Houston hip hop, my sneaker preferences also evolved and transformed to more Jordan. So today, present day, I'm a Jordan girl through and through. But I started with the Nike Dunks, which are more my origin pair. So one of my favorites is the Nike Dunk Low. And so this is considered a lifestyle shoe. So a lifestyle shoe is something that you can leave by the door, you can take it to the store, you can dress it up, you can dress it down, you can really wear it with anything. So my first question that I'm going to ask you is, how do you connect to sneakers? And there's no right or wrong answer, right? So don't overthink it, just think, how do you connect to sneakers? For me, it's a lot of the storytelling and the comfort, right? I need it to be comfortable pair. Some people, it's functionality. So if you're a runner, it's an excuse to never wear dress shoes again. I agree with that. Heels don't really have a great place in my closet right now. And so the functionality, you may connect to sneakers through, if you're a runner, you may want a running shoe, like Bart said. If you're a hooper, you may want a basketball shoe to customize, right? So Sean said functional versatility. I love that. That is chef's kiss. Sports and casual, comfort and walking, style. And so for me, this shoe, this is a Nike Dunk Low. It is a grade school size. It's from about 2007, 2008, a little bit of an older pair. But I'm part of the small feet tribe, so I can wear kid sizes. And I connected to the sneaker really through the design on the upper. So the upper is the top part of the shoe. It is part of the Nike Back to School pack. So it looks very familiar. It looks like a composition notebook, right? And so this was an extension of my personality, of my identity, because I'm a writer at heart. And so wrote a lot of horror stories and scary stories when I was in elementary school. That's a whole nother Zoom conversation on parenting. But I had a ton of these composition notebooks stacked up. So when I saw this pair, it was immediately like, I need that pair. It spoke to me. I gravitated towards it because of the story. And I'm a sucker for sneaker storytelling, right? So it has the panels have that kind of black and white aesthetic that is synonymous to the composition notebooks. The side panels have wide ruled notebook paper. It's offset by the Nike swoosh or the check, and very lightweight, right? And so as you think about other ways that you connect to sneakers, it may be a moment in time. Like I said, I love horror stories. So Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. This pair is a Nike Dunk SB. So skateboarding, it was meant for the board, the durability, the thicker tongue. And so this pair has kind of a monochromatic color palette. It has that cream, kind of very beige upper that looks like a mummy. It's called the mummy. It's a little more exclusive dunk, I would say. It has the mummy, wrap coming out the back. It has the graphic eyes on the heel tab. And it reminds me of Halloween. So when I go out with my kids trick-or-treating, I'm flexing on all the kids. I'm the cool mom. And so the midsole section, which is this area right underneath the upper, it actually glows in the dark, right? So it has cool details. And details are really important when you're thinking about customizing your shoe. So we touched on how you connect to the sneaker through maybe functionality, maybe a moment in time. Jennifer said style. So let's get into the style. How do you connect to the sneaker through your own style? So I would challenge you to answer this question in your mind or in the chat. And how would you articulate your style? Like, how do you literally describe it? If I said, hey, Melissa, what is your style? Or Chad, how would you describe your style to me? For me, mine is very like tomboy chic. So it's like graphic t-shirts, rugby t-shirts, blazers, maybe a dress here and there. But 99% of the time, I am wearing some sneakers. I'm comfortable, straightforward, like my old school Monarchs. Monarchs are very like, they'll sold a lot. So that's one. Chad said anything with Travis Scott's name on it. Yeah, definitely. I have like one or two pairs of Travis Scott's, and yeah, the resale is very high on those, right? And so this one it looks very simple compared to the other ones. It has a two-tone colorway. It is a Nike Dunk High, so it has that high construction around the ankle collar. You really can't go wrong with a two-tone colorway, but the reason I connected to this sneaker through my style is the color. I love orange. Orange is one of my favorite colors. It's very versatile. It's very transitional through seasons. So think about maybe, what colors do you like? What colors do you wear often? Maybe it's colors that you want to get into, right? So it has a white leather base, all the panels, the swoosh, the shoelaces, the outsole, which is dirty because I wear my sneakers, it's all orange, right? So I can pair this color with a lot of different browns, greens, blues, and it would still look really good. So Nike Dunks, they weren't on Nike by You before, but they are now on the customization platform. So perfect timing for you all. And this is a pair that you can actually choose and either buy it as is, or you can customize it to your liking, right? So we're going to jump really quickly into some classics. You all may know these, but this is an Air Max 1, an Air Force 1, and an Air Jordan 1, right? And so the Air Max 1 this was customized on Nike by You. We worked with Nike directly to sell this color as kind of an inspirational colorway in 2020. And this is the Air Max 1 is really the OG in the family tree of Air Maxes, right? It's kind of the originator. And so it has a beautiful blue mud guard. It has a gold toe box with mesh for breathability. In Houston, it's very hot. In Florida, it's hot too. So think about the materials that you're using. You can customize depending on the shoe. You can customize and use satin. You can use canvas. You can use leather on different parts of the shoe. And like I said, the small details on the back of this on the heel tab, it says CR8, and that stands for create. And so we made this to be just out of creative expression, just to say, hey, during 2020, it's kind of a weird time. Keep creating, keep leaning into your art, whatever that looks like, even if you're not like a traditional artist, right? You can create stories and you can create art through sneaker design. And so this is one of my favorite Air Max ones, very comfortable. Why don't they have a side zipper on the high tops? Some of them do, actually. Some of the newer models do have kind of that side zipper. It is easier, I would say. I'm flat-footed, wide foot a little bit, even though it's a small wide foot. Sometimes it is easier to have that zipper versus getting into the high top. So a low top may be a way better option. Had the original Jordan 1s, really wish I had saved them. Same. I had the Chicago colorway, wish I would have saved those. So let's get into an Air Force 1. Nelly wrote a song about it. He told us to buy 2 pairs, a white on white Air Force 1. You can never go wrong. But if you had a pair that was very, very colorful, you have your, this is actually a collaboration with Undefeated. So it has a lot of color all over the shoe. And if you wanted something that was bold and colorful, if you have that type of personality, you can actually customize all these different parts of the shoe to infuse that, And so you can also change the color of your outsole and your midsole to be different colors. They don't have to be white, right? And so very, very classic pair. And when I say classic pair, that means it's timeless. It has transcended all of the the trendy things over the decades, and it's still a go-to sneaker, right? So if you like Air Force 1s, I would also say to go half a size down because they run half a size big, and unless you have a wider foot and you just want some room, right? So that's kind of a fun fact. And then lastly, we have the Air Jordan 1, which I'm biased, it's my favorite. So designed in the 80s by Peter Moore. You have this one, it has a patent leather makeover on it. But in Air Jordan 1, it's had so many different variations. You have the high top, which is this one. You have a low top. You have golf shoes that are also Air Jordans now. So if you want to be fly on the green, I suggest you get some Jordan golf shoes. But this is the OG patent bread. So the bread is the black and red colorway, just much like this Air Jordan 11, black and red, represent the Bulls, basically, is where that comes from. And so if you haven't seen the movie Air, I would highly suggest that you stream that movie. It's great. And it talks about Michael Jordan coming over to the swoosh. And so one of my favorite pairs of sneakers, but you may also just want to do something fun with your shoe. So before we get to the best tips and tricks that I'll throw out there for you, you will be getting a Nike digital gift card. It has a walkthrough of the site, so you really don't have to memorize everything that I'm saying, but the site, the platform, Nike by You, is very user-friendly. So that will help you as you start getting your designs together. Also, if you want to connect and just ask my advice or talk more about sneakers, Cassidy Edwards on LinkedIn. You can find me working at TradeBlock. But one of my favorite sneakers is an Air Jordan 1. It is customized. So plot twist, one of the biggest trends I'm seeing in sneaker culture today is customization, right? So it's everything that you all will be contributing to, and you're really enhancing that creative expression in a culture that we love, right? It's a full circle moment for me because I've been in sneakers for so long. And so this is usually where the chat gets a little spicy, a little divisive, because we talk about sports. I think I saw Minnesota somewhere around here. So I may know who you rock with, but a lot of people in their small details, the little text that you can put on the shoe, they use initials, they use area codes, special dates, but sometimes people just want to use colors that rep their team, right? And so for me, I am from Houston, Texas. Like I said, my dad is a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan. I am not by any means. We usually disown each other around football season, and then we come back together after it's all done. Yes, wise. And so we're in the same conference though, and that's why we butt heads. But I wanted to show you all my favorite. It is an Air Jordan 1 Philadelphia Eagles edition. It kind of fades from like a dark green to a light green. It says Fly Eagles Fly on the midsole. It's more like Cry Eagles Cry right now. The Chiefs beat us last year, but it's okay. We're going to come back. So it may be just as simple as picking colors to customize based on things that you really love or that you like. And so a couple of best tips and tricks before we round it out for you all today is number one, have fun with it, right? So it takes time sometimes to customize a sneaker. So take your time with it. Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was a fly sneaker. That's number two. And number three, make sure that you create a free Nike member account. So I'll say that one more time. Create a free Nike member account because it does save all of your designs. And I would hate for you to lose your design after you've been working on it for a long time, but bring your friends into it, have fun with it, bring your family in. And sneaker design is an art. It's an art and a science. Eagles, the credibility, I love that. I usually get some boos in the chat, but I embrace it all. I love it. So hopefully Detailery won't give us a bad rating, but I am going to drop a quick survey in the chat. Let us know what other shoes you want to hear more of. We have a lot of different shoes to go through. Do you want to design a shoe together? Happy to connect, and I hope you learned something in this mini masterclass. Thank you for coming into my sneaker office today, and I hope you have a great afternoon. So I'm going to pass it back, but always love talking about sneakers. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Cassidy. Appreciate it. Nathan, Al, Haley, and myself, thanks for everybody joining. I do appreciate it. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Nathan, Al, or Haley, do you have anything else you guys want to touch before we shut it down?
Well, thanks everybody for coming. And Cassidy, that was awesome. That was
awesome.
I can take no credit. I was not part of the webinar design, but having Cassidy here was awesome. That was very great to learn, great to see.
Thank you so much.
That was awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.